I'm so inspired because so many of the people I've met already, I know, are carrying the torch, fighting for our freedom every day. But before we go any further, I want to know, do we have anybody here who's a veteran or who's in active service right now? Put your hands up if you're actively serving, you're a veteran. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Thank you. God bless you. So before we go any further, I also want to give a shout out to our friends at This Is Our West and Laura Lee. Laura Lee, a familiar face. We ran into each other in Kansas, right? Yeah. So before we go any further, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and my background. And let me see, is there anybody here who's actively farming? If you're actively farming, great. Anybody here who comes from a farming family? Your family farms. Maybe you don't farm? Okay, great. The rest of you have a garden. Do you grow vegetables or grow anything in your backyard? Okay, good. And for the rest of you that didn't raise your hands, do you eat food? Okay, good, perfect. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. This nice gentleman here is gonna help me go through some slides. This is Liberty Farm. It's in Paris, Virginia. It's about an hour approximately from the White House on a Saturday at 2 o'clock. During rush hour traffic, it's going to take you a good long time to get to the White House from where we are. It's surreal because you're in the heart of Washington, D.C., the swamp, right? And you drive out west and you hit bucolic green countryside. And this farm is surrounded by thousands of acres of farmland. It's also surrounded by federally owned land. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Mount Vernon, Virginia. That's the same George Washington's Mount Vernon, just outside of Washington, D.C. I'm the youngest of 3 girls and came from a hardworking family. My mom and dad taught us that in the United States of America, my dad served our country, you can be anything you want in life. He said you just have to work hard. That's all you have to do. And he determined and dedicated, and we live in the greatest nation on earth. I never dreamed that I would work so hard my whole life to be a farmer. It was my childhood dream to be a farmer. And instead of being able to farm the land I love, we were faced with miles and miles of red tape, over-regulation, and abuse by a tyrannical local government working hand in hand with an environmental group and realtors. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Wanted you to know that there was a gentleman here earlier who spoke, and he talked about how the numbers matter, that together we can do great things. And I'm living, breathing proof that one person can make a difference, and that together we can right wrongs and we can make a difference. So I don't have a clicker, so I'm going to use an imaginary clicker. So I ended up wanting to be a farmer because after my grandfather died, my grandmother lived with us, and she turned our backyard in Mount Vernon, Virginia, into a farm. Literally trellises everywhere. We grew enough vegetables for not only to feed our family, but for our community, and that's where my dream was born. And that dream became reality in 2006. We purchased a farm called Liberty Farm that you saw earlier, but at the time that we purchased it, it kind of looked like a scene from the movie Deliverance. Have you seen Deliverance? It had been abandoned for about a decade. The locals were dumping their trash on this abandoned farm. And I remember my dad saying, he's in heaven now, but I remember my dad saying, of all the farms, you want this farm? It spoke to me. I wanted to save this farm, and it needed a lot of work and repair. We had to lift the barn on hydraulic lifts. We had to create an infrastructure so we could actually start farming. And shortly after we brought on, we brought on livestock. We raised emus. Emus are the second fastest land bird in the world. They go about 40 miles an hour. They're from the rat-type family, the same family as ostriches. And now if you're ever playing Trivial Pursuit and ostrich emu question comes up, you'll know all the answers, right? But so we have emus, llamas, alpacas, cows. We have chickens, goats, sheep, and I'm a beekeeper. We grow heirloom tomatoes, and we put a lot of love into the land. It's the hardest I've ever worked in my life. It's a labor of love. As those of you know that have been in farming or come from farming backgrounds, Or even if you have your own little backyard garden, it takes a lot of work and love. So I'm going to leave this here. It says, please leave my family and our farm alone. So in 2006, when we purchased this farm, I didn't even know what a land trust was. Didn't even know what a conservation easement was. But I trusted the land trust. Why? Because they told us that we'd be able to farm this land forever. And we believed them. So shortly after we entered into this contractual arrangement, we received a cease and desist notice. And the cease and desist notice said that we couldn't even bush hog without getting permission, written permission. And they had the weight and authority of the government behind them, and that's why they had the authority to tell us we couldn't do anything without their permission. Well, we were shocked. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that in America, in the United States, you could buy a farm, zone rural agricultural, in an agricultural county, in a right to farm state, and be told that we couldn't even farm without getting permission. And it didn't stop there. Our easement, our deed, included that we could engage in industrial, commercial, and agricultural activity. And that is what, farming is commerce, right? Otherwise we'd be gardening. I mean, we bought the farm to be able to farm and sell the fruit of our labor to the community. And this group decided that they didn't want the public coming to our farm. And they worked hand in hand with the locality to enforce this egregious tyrannical overregulation. And how did they do that? Well, if the government wants your property, and they're working hand in hand with these NGOs, they don't have to come with a bulldozer to take your land. They don't even have to use eminent domain. They can regulate you off your land. So we started having this revolving door of the ABCs of government agencies coming out of our farm. One day it was the Department of Transportation, and they tell us that they're going to dig a trench around part of our farm to prevent us from bringing vehicles on and off of our property, to control our access to our own farm. Then we have animal wardens coming to make sure that our cattle are warm enough outside when it's snowing. Then we have folks coming and demanding to do inspections of our inside of the buildings on our property. And when I would ask, why are you here? What right do you have to be here? They would say, you better do what we're telling you to do, and if you don't, we're going to take you to court, right? So these inspections became more frequent, sometimes multiple times a day. Sometimes it would be one inspector, sometimes it would be up to 6, and they started engaging in really egregious behavior that included looking in our closets, photographing our personal private possessions, photographing our bathrooms, photographing our laundry, photographing our animals, standing on our chairs to look in our attic space. It was horrifying. I felt completely invaded. I couldn't believe this was the United States of America, and all along they said, you have to do what we say because we have the support of the government behind us, and you have to do what we say. We had no idea what was really happening behind closed doors, and I'm going to tell you about that now. So, So they couldn't get us for farming, right? The only way they could get us is to say that we were, and I use the word get us because that's exactly what this was. The bad guys wanted our farm, and they were willing to do anything in their power to get it. And so what did they do? Couldn't tell us we could stop farming, so they had to find that we were doing something wrong. So this is a birthday party for 8 10-year-old little girls. It's in our barn. It's in the middle of January. It's snowing outside. We had birthday cake. We opened up presents. These are things that you do in your home. Does anybody here think that there's anything that we're doing that's illegal, violates zoning, something that needs to be regulated, or should the government be involved in a private birthday party with 8 10-year-old girls on your property? Anybody? I didn't think so. Well, apparently our locality felt that we had violated the law. So they sent us a cease and desist notice that said that that birthday party would require a special exception permit, full-blown hearings, and a site plan. All of that together would have cost us over $100,000. And we wanted to know why. And they said, because you're engaging in having the public come to your farm, and therefore you're going to need the kind of permitting that Ringling, Barnum, and Bailey Circus would need in order to engage in private birthday parties on your property. We were also teaching beekeeping and animal husbandry, things like that. But this was that birthday party was the violation. What? So here's the you can't make this stuff up. Can't make this up. They threatened us with $15,000 a day if we kept our doors open. $5,000 per violation, and it carries criminal ramifications. Criminal ramifications for farming, for having a birthday party, and for engaging in commerce on our farm. And what was the commerce? Selling my vegetables to the public. On land zone, rural agricultural, in an agricultural county, in a right to farm state. This happened in America. What? I even had a business license for a retail farm shop. Our county requires us to get permission from them in order to sell the fruit of our labor to the public. And we have to pay for the privilege of selling what we produce on our land to the public, on our own farm. Farm stands that you see on the side of the road, we have to get permission from the government to do that. And we did it. Even though we had that, they still sent us this stand down, stop everything you're doing, $15,000 a day to continue to farm. So, many of you might be wondering, what in the world were these people growing on their farm, right? To get this much attention from the government. So this conservation easement, the land trust that had this conservation easement, they decided that they were going to create a false and fraudulent historic designation on our property. Now, I'm from Virginia. You can't walk very far without something historic happening in Virginia. But what this land trust did was that they advertised the farm as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own a piece of American history. They said that our farm was the exact location where Stonewall Jackson himself bivouacked before the Battle of Manassas. Not only did they advertise this on the World Wide Web, they wrote it into our deed and our easement on the property. And we felt like, wow, this is a group that gets millions of dollars from the government. They must know, they must tell the truth, right? I mean, after all, they wouldn't write it into our deed that Stonewall Jackson himself bivouacked with his battalions and all of his troops, thousands of men on our farm if it really didn't happen. So one day, the conservation easement, working hand in hand with the government, sent us this notice, and they say, your farm, because it's hallowed ground, you have to fence off 20 acres of your land, because that's where Stonewall Jackson himself bivouacked. We thought, wow, we better fence off this land, because if we don't, they're going to take us to court, and we're already, they're coming after us. We better do it. And oh, by the way, none of your cows are allowed, or your livestock are allowed in this area. That's where Stonewall Jackson was. There can be no recreational activity, no human activity, and no animal activity, because this is a national treasure. This is where Stonewall Jackson himself bivouacked. And I remember saying, well, sir, forgive me, but you don't want my cows in there. What about the deer? And the birds? And the wild turkeys? And the bears? And the squirrels? And all the other wildlife? Oh, but that's okay, because that's natural wildlife. But my cows weren't allowed. My cows were not considered natural. And I said, but sir, you do realize cows were around when Stonewall Jackson was here. It didn't matter, because when the bad guys want to take away your freedom and your liberty, you can't rationalize with them. You can't make them see the light, because they don't care. And that's exactly what happened here. Click. So my dream came crashing down when the government came after us. I couldn't believe that this was America. When my mom and dad said, work hard, be dedicated, and you can be anything you want in America, they didn't say you had to get permission from the government. They didn't say that you had to beg and fight to protect your dream of what you wanted to be. And that is exactly what we dealt with. And we fought for 10 long years. Well, it turns out, and I know you guys know this was coming, Stonewall Jackson was never ever on our farm. There's no historical evidence that he was ever anywhere near our farm. There's no historical evidence that Stonewall Jackson's troops were on our farm. The whole thing was fabricated. It was a total sham. It was a sham that was in part paid for by our tax dollars. Because this group was so radicalized that they were willing to do and say anything to take control of our property and our farm. So for years, we lost use and enjoyment of land on our farm that we were paying a mortgage on, that we worked really hard to have, to live out our dream. We weren't allowed to grow crops there, our livestock wasn't allowed there, they didn't even want us there. And it's an outrage that this happened, but these kinds of things do happen in our country. And this story has now been heard all over the world. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, because if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone, and it could happen to you. And we fought back and we won. But it took hard work, and it took the work of everyday, hard-working Americans. Because here's the thing, when we got into this battle, you know, the government has an unlimited war chest, right? It's paid for by our tax dollars. They can afford to litigate against us for as long as they want. And it's our tax dollars that are being used against us to take away our property rights and our freedom and our liberty. And I'm so grateful for the gentleman that spoke to you earlier, because, you know, it really takes unlimited resources and people coming together, because we didn't have their war chest, but we had we the people. And what happened here in Virginia is yes, thank you, we the people. And we started a tsunami. And it started in the grassroots, and we built alliances, and pretty soon great things started to happen. And I went literally from being on my farm to being on national television. I was so terrified. I was so scared to speak, and now you can't get me to be quiet. I'll tell you, once I went through this, and I know how devastating it was. When I first started talking to people, I could barely speak. I would shake and I would cry, and now every opportunity I get, I want to encourage people and give them the tools that they need, the toolbox that they need to go out and fight for liberty and for property rights. So, click. All right, so what did we do? How did we fight back, and what ended up happening here? So, we started these protests all over the Commonwealth of Virginia. And at first it started off as farmers and landowners that came together. We weren't allowed to have our real pitchforks, so we made signs, we used wood, plastic, whatever we needed to do. We had them all over the Commonwealth of Virginia. We had them in Richmond, Virginia, on the footsteps of the General Assembly. We packed the General Assembly. We had them all over the state. We started petitions. We started forming alliances. Thousands and thousands of people were calling into our General Assembly and to our representatives, to our congressmen. And before we knew it, we had a tsunami like we've never seen before. And it took a lot of work and a lot of people like you and me, and hardworking Americans that just love our country and didn't want to see this happen. And it turns out we had 2 bills passed, and I'm humbled and I'm grateful for them. The first one's named the Boneta bill, a bipartisan bill, because it shouldn't matter whether you're on the left or the right. Property rights affect us all. It affects every single American in our country. And let me tell you, there were people that were not on my side of the aisle, that were not conservatives like I am, and they may not agree with me on anything else, but when they saw the videos of what was happening on our farm, they rallied for us. They rallied. My father, God bless him, he's in heaven, he said, why don't you videotape them when they come and they do these inspections? Now this is a man who doesn't use the internet, never had a cell phone, all right? And he's telling me to videotape these abusive inspections. And I said, well, Dad, what if they tell me I can't videotape them? He said, what's wrong with you? It's your farm. You own this land. You can videotape anybody you want to on it. So we installed the video cameras. And they went viral. People would cry out when they saw these videos. These were folks coming in, pushing me out of the way, pushing my family and my supporters that were there out of the way and saying, get out of the way, open up that closet, we have to see what's in it. Climbing on our chairs, looking in our attic, taking pictures of our laundry. It's amazing how bullies, if there's not a camera on them, boy, they really show themselves, right? So we have this videotape, it's shown in the General Assembly. We end up passing the first Boneta bill, which says that if you're farming and you're on land zone rural agricultural, you have a right to farm and you don't have to get permission from the government to do it. We did it. Yeah. Not only that, but you don't have to get a permit to farm, and you don't have to pay the government for permission to farm. And you have a right to sell what you produce on your land to the people. And the government has no right to stand in your way from doing that. And that is the law in Virginia right here and right now. And it wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been possible without hardworking Americans. You know, we had people that took time off from work. They took their kids out of school. They used their vacation time to come and be a part of this battle. And, you know, I'll tell you something that I heard growing up, and it's so true. The battles that we are guaranteed not to win, the battles that we're guaranteed to lose are the ones that we don't fight in, right? So often, it's easy to feel discouraged. And this is our Virginia state flag. We had literally had thousands of people at the oldest legislative body in our country lined up to fight for this. It shouldn't take that. It shouldn't take thousands of people fighting for which are fundamentally right, our rights. You know, our rights come from God, not from the government. So the flag that you saw before, well, this is one of the rallies, but I don't know if you can go back. If you can't, don't worry about it. But the irony of all of this is that the Virginia flag, does anybody know what the Virginia flag says underneath it? It says Sic Semper Tyrannis. You can't really see it here. And it's virtue. Virtue. And she has, you can't really see it, she has her bare foot on the neck of tyranny. On the neck of tyranny. Yeah. Who knows what Sic Semper Tyrannis means? Yes. Yes. And that's our flag in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And this happened in Virginia. This happened in Virginia. So on this day, it was absolutely freezing. It was so cold that schools were actually closed, and people came from all over the state to be heard. That's we the people. Can you see this? They're holding signs that say corruption in Fauquier. They're saying, you know, justice for farmers, truth to power. I mean, this took on a life of its own. Keep going. What else did we do? What else did we do? We used social media. Because we didn't have the war chest of the bad guys, we used social media. And what we did was, we used Twitter, Facebook. Who here has a Twitter account? Facebook account. Do you have your own email lists? You would be amazed how influential you can be in terms of who you get elected and your policy and what laws you have. You know, people say, well, Martha, I'm just one person, what can I do? I don't have thousands of people following me like you do. I'm not on TV. How can I make a difference? You would be amazed. Every single one of you can shine a light on issues to at least 1,000 people. And there's how many people here? I don't know, 175? Let's pretend 200 people. Each one of you can influence at least 1,000 people. It only takes 2 or 3. In Virginia, races are won or lost by 6 votes sometimes, maybe 10, right? Each one of you can make a difference. You're members of churches, maybe you're members of PTAs, civic groups. Your voice can be heard, and you can make a difference, and that's exactly what we did, and we got very creative. So here's one. Virginia has a $2.4 billion shortfall, while fat cats get richer with fake $100 million conservation easement tax credits. And these are 2 people on a farm drinking champagne, throwing money in the air. Keep going. Free Virginia conservation tax credits, no questions asked. Keep going. Stop the PEC abuse and oppression. Now this is a strong message, right? This is somebody with their face on the ground with a boot on their neck. That is a strong message, and some of you might think that is too strong. It's not. It's not. You know, freedom, we live in the greatest nation on earth. I thank God every day. I'm so grateful to be an American. And when our rights and our freedoms are trampled on, this message is the message that needs to be seen. Keep going. So before I knew it, I went from literally feeding the animals on the farm, harvesting vegetables, mucking stalls, fixing fences, to speaking on a national scale. And when I look back now, I really can't believe it, because back then it was so hard for me to get any words out, and now I do it every day of my life. And each one of us have a voice, and we need to use that voice. We need to use that voice. Writing letters to the editor. How many people have ever written a letter to the editor? This is good. Wow. This is great. This is wonderful. You know, I speak to groups, and a lot of folks in the group, nobody writes letters to the editor. You know, call into your local radio stations. You know, use your cell phones as your own personal way of communicating with the public and getting the word out. So there's a term of art that I wanted to talk to you about that I didn't even hear of before until I started dealing with the radicalized environmentalists, and that's called the viewshed. Have you guys heard this term of art, the viewshed? And the viewshed is very subjective, right? To me, a working farm is beautiful. The tractors are beautiful, the hard work is beautiful, the old trucks are beautiful, because farmers are the heartbeat of America, producing food for our nation. Amen, right? Well, unfortunately, to this radicalized group, these things are unsightly. They don't want to see them. And I remember talking to their representative, and I said, well, sir, you do realize that we produce food that feeds the community, right? How do you think we do that? You know, we use bush hogs, we need tractors, we need trucks to haul things out. How are we supposed to do that? That's not my problem. This is unsightly, and it's impacting the viewshed. And I said, well, sir, what is the viewshed? He said, see over there? And I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, that's federally owned property over there. It's federally owned property over there. And your farm is right next to it. And we have a right, because you're in the viewshed of that park right there. And because you're in the viewshed of that park, we can tell you what you can do on your farm, because we don't have to look at it from that park. And we own that park. Can you imagine? Our tax dollars pay for that federally owned land, and because our farm was in the viewshed of it, they felt like they could tell us what we could do on our land. So to make a long story short, we had an RV, a recreational vehicle on our farm, and we received a notice, and they said, you have 10 days to relocate your RV because it's in the viewshed. And we find it to be offensive. Now this was not a big, huge viewshed. Nothing was written on it. It was just an older recreational vehicle. And I thought, I asked myself, can you define what is a viewshed? Can you define this magical viewshed? And who determines what the viewshed is? I said, well, it's anything that's it's within the site of the federally owned land. That's the viewshed. Well, we ended up having to move the RV. This is before we engaged We the People, because we didn't know any better. We moved the RV. And at this point, as you can imagine, $15,000 a day adds up very quickly, so we were shut down. We completely shut down, full-on harvest. We had to move our produce. We had people coming from all over trying to help us. We were trying to push our product out as fast as we could. We didn't want to lose our investment. We ended up donating a lot that we couldn't move quickly enough. It was a very sad time in my life. And at one point, I remember we thought, how can I do this? Like, you know, the legal bills, the stress. We were in full-blown litigation at this point. And I had a friend say, well, have you done a Freedom of Information Act request? And I thought, a Freedom of Information Act request? Yeah, do a Freedom of Information Act request. Ask for every communication. And I know some of the folks here that might work for the local county government might not like me saying this, but the Freedom of Information Act request, we did a simple request I'd like to have every communication that mentions my name, my address, or my farm. And they wrote back and they said, well, that's going to cost you $1,000 a page. They said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Boneta. We have no problem providing you with those documents. It's going to cost you $1,000 a page. And I said, how many pages are there? Thousands. And I said, this can't be right. I mean, the Freedom of Information Act is supposed to do what? Freedom, right? We're supposed to be able to have access to what the government is doing, and they're going to make it unaffordable for us. They're going to make it impossible for us to find out about our farm and our land. So the state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, has an ombudsman down in Richmond to handle things like this. So I called down there and I said, sir, something doesn't seem right here. They're telling me it's $1,000 a page. And he said, no, it's only supposed to be what their actual cost is to produce this document for you. Their actual cost. If it's 2 cents a page, they can charge you 2 cents a page. And I said, okay, sir. So I called the county back and I said, listen, I'm told that it's only supposed to cost whatever your cost is. Oh, yes, we'll recalculate it. We're only going to charge you 5 cents a page, but we're also going to charge you $250 an hour to have somebody in our office go through all the documents and determine what is responsive to your request. I want you to think about this, right? The Freedom of Information Act is available to we the people so that we can do what? Right? And so I went back and I thought, no, this is not right. You can't charge $200. Well, the code says we can charge reasonable fees for, having somebody pull the. They went out of their way to prevent my family from uncovering the corruption and the fraud and what was really behind this land grab. And that's what it was, a land grab. We got lawyers involved. They provided us with responses to our Freedom of Information Act. Then when we got into discovery, we did subpoenas and discovery requests. And we knew that they were withholding stuff from us because there was a whistleblower that had told us that they were not providing us with everything. So the lawyer sent a spoliation notice to the county, saying something like, if you don't provide us with everything that we know you have that you're holding back, we're going to have access to your servers. And I guess they bring in, and the lawyers here can speak to what spoliation notices are, we're going to send folks in and we're going to pull the documents ourselves. Forensic people go in and I guess scrub the servers or whatever. The next thing we know, what does the county say? Oh, mea culpa, oopsie. We just happened to find this mystery file that I don't know how it didn't make it in your discovery responses. And it was communication after communication after communication. The hubris, they actually documented it, of how to get our family off of the farm. Well, have you contacted the Virginia Department of Transportation? Yep, we sent them. Have you contacted the animal warden? Yep, we sent them. Have you sent zoning after them? Yep, we shut them down. Well, have you tried to have the bank call in the due on sale clause on their mortgage? These are people paid for by our tax dollars, working hand in hand with a radicalized environmental group, NGO. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this really happened, and they documented it in writing. Turns out they contacted our mortgage company. They tried to buy the mill on our farm. When they wouldn't buy when the bank said, look, you're crossing a line here, this communication is going to stop now, we're not engaging in this conversation anymore. Then they threatened to talk to the board of directors. Then they offered to have all of this real estate transaction go through their bank, which would, give the bank millions of dollars worth of business. This is all documented. And you're probably thinking, how is this possible, right? It's possible. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, and it can happen to anyone. So it didn't stop there. So as we're going through this process, there's more media attention on this. And the American people are becoming outraged. And what started off as a Virginia conversation becomes a national conversation. So we started pushing out more. The more they came after me, the more we pushed back. So we started pushing this messaging out everywhere we could. Land trust, enjoy corruption, fraud, theft, corruption, extortion, collusion, conspiracy, intimidation, harassment, right? Strong language. But when you don't have an unlimited war chest And you only have we the people. We needed to get our message out. We needed to get our message out. So then what do the bad guys do? If they can't win on the facts, you manufacture them. And if that doesn't work, because we had all, at this point, we had all the documentation. We had everything. Then they try and dirty your name. They try to take away your credibility. They want to throw as much mud and dirt on you as they can, because they can't win on the facts, they can't win on the law, so they're going to try and dirty you up as much as possible. Well, nobody told me that before I got into this. But I learned to have really thick skin after a while. And at this point, this movement had become so large. You see, it says grow vegetables, not government. Stop land trust abuse. It's our money, our choice, I mean our tax dollars. You know, stop the PEC. Keep going. Beware of conservation death trap. Free cheese tax credits. Keep going. Virginia conservation milking taxpayers $100 million a year. So the more they doubled down on us, the more we had created alliances. We were doubling down back on them. Because remember, we don't have the unlimited war chest. Keep going. Expose, expose, expose. What Virginia tax credits pay for, radical, hysterical, unhinged environmental extremism. Right? So we'll stop there. So this went back and forth. I was in this battle for 10 years. And I'm here to tell you that we the people can win. We did win. We did win. We passed 2 bills, not one. The first bill keeps the government off of our farms in the Commonwealth. The second bill provides oversight and accountability of these radical land trusts. And I'll tell you something. It shouldn't take this. It shouldn't take thousands of people from all across the Commonwealth. It shouldn't take thousands of people from all across our country. We shouldn't have to go and pass 2 bills to give us the freedom and liberty. That's ours. We shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to go on national television. We shouldn't have to use that kind of aggressive messaging. But we did, and we prevailed. There's another thing that happened too. You probably heard about this. That one of the supervisors in my county, who was on the board of this environmental group, who should have recused himself because he also wrote the easement language on the property. He disclosed to a small group of people, "Don't worry about that woman." They couldn't even say my name. Okay. So we had thousands of people throughout the Commonwealth wearing buttons that said, "I'm with that woman," because they hated me so much that they couldn't even use my name. Don't worry about that woman. We've got this all taken care of. She's under IRS audit, and it's going to bury that family. Now, here's the thing. He didn't realize who some of the people were in that room. So they come over to our farm, and they're like, "Wow, I'm so sorry. We just heard from the supervisor that your family's under audit, and you guys are going to get buried and lose the farm." I said, "That's ridiculous. They'll say anything, won't they?" We hadn't received the audit yet, and within a week, we received the audit. A sitting elected official disclosed to the public that we were subjects of an IRS audit before we even received the audit. And it's all state stamped. To make a long story short, I ended up speaking to congressional members. There was a TikTok investigation launched, and guess what? He's no longer a supervisor. I've learned a lot from this experience. I've learned a lot. I've learned that tyranny is alive and well. It's alive and well in our country. And the bad guys will stop at nothing to win. But I've also learned that we the people can beat them. We can fight for freedom. We can keep the American dream alive. And that together we're doing it all across our communities. This organization right here is doing it. You guys are doing it. You're fighting back and you're winning. You are. Oh wait, you can go back to that one. Go ahead. So, one of the things that has come from all of this is I've learned several things. I've learned that we need to lift up folks into office that are not afraid to fight for us. And we need to reward them and continue to help them and have their backs when they stick their necks out for us. But I've also learned we need to hold the bad ones accountable. And if they're not doing what they promised, it's time to get them out of office. It's time to get them out of office. Yeah. I know you feel the same way. I'm tired of our elected promising us the world and not delivering. And so when we have elected that carry our values with us, that are willing to fight for us, we do need to have their backs, but we also need to get rid of those and show them the door when they fail us time and time again. So I had the privilege and the honor of having Mike Pence and Karen Pence at my farm. They came to our farm and they celebrated American agriculture. They revealed their platform for the American family farmer, and we celebrated the victory of our bills on our farm with Vice President Mike Pence and Karen Pence. You know, none of this would have been possible. And I get to meet great people every day. None of this would have been possible without people like you and me out there fighting. And now when people call me from all over the country, it doesn't matter to me where they're located or whether I personally am affected by their issue. I want to help them because I just spent the rest of my life trying to help the countless people that came out to help me and my family. And I'm so grateful every day. I thank God for the opportunity to share my experience with you, but also to inspire and motivate people to go out there and to fight and to not give up and to organize and to correct the wrongs that are out there. Like, one of the things that they did with me when I went through this was to just discredit me time and time again, because we were becoming so engaged in the political process, we were becoming so engaged with legislation, was to try and belittle me and tear me down as much as they can. And whenever you put yourself out there, expect it and eat it for breakfast. Expect it. They're going to do it. They're going to come after you. So for me, it was, if that woman's bill becomes law, there'll be strip clubs and chicken coops throughout the Commonwealth. Think about that, right? Think about that. And I had people saying, aren't you horrified? Isn't that terrible? And I would say, friends, I do have an old barn, and what those chickens do when I'm not there is not my problem. That's exactly right. So we need to pick our battles, right? And we can't be out, we can't be out there over every little thing. So everything they threw at us, we threw it right back at them. So this was one of the memes that was circulated. Virginia official, can you guys read what that says? Complains about unlawful strip clubs on farms, and it's a farmer shearing sheep. Yeah, so some of the advice that I give is to use humor, right? Because at the end of the day, I want to keep working with the legislature. I want to keep working in my community. I don't want to make enemies of everybody, right? So when things like that would happen, instead of being angry, I would just infuse humor and throw it right back at them, right? Because at the end of the day, I want to work with these people. So, I've learned a lot. I think that the most important thing of all is that this is our country. Those folks that rose their hand, that are veterans, that are in active duty, that rose their hand in the beginning, they would give their lives for our country. And we live in the greatest nation on earth. Despite the radical environmentalists, the extremists, despite burdensome overregulation and red tape, and this is our country, and we can fight for it, and we can restore our property rights. Freedom stands on the shoulders of property rights. It stands on the shoulders of property, and freedom and property rights are inseparable. It is worthy, property rights are worthy of our passion, of our fight, and it is my hope and prayer that you will all continue to carry the torch for freedom and to fight for property rights. Okay? Amen. Thank you. Thank you. A few more slides. This is a case went to the Virginia Supreme Court. It was a victory. We won. It says that these conservation easements are to be interpreted in favor of the farmer. The farmer. Right? Now, it cost over $500,000 in legal fees. Okay, this was not easy. It took literally an army of freedom fighters, like all of us here. But now it puts the burden on the government, right? It puts the burden on these environmental groups. It puts the burden on folks that want to take away our property rights to prove why they have a right to do that, instead of just taking away the farmers' rights. So the language now has to be interpreted in every instance in favor of the landowner or the farmer. It's huge, it's unprecedented, it's incredible. Keep going. So we started this grassroots movement. Keep going. Like I said, when you put yourself out there, you're going to be attacked. When I would go and I would speak to the General Assembly, this one gentleman said, "You're not a real farmer. You don't look like a farmer." I said, "Sir, come with me. We're going to muck stalls together. Come with me and feed, And so I invited the General Assembly. I said, "Come on, both sides of the aisle, come on, come to my farm." And frankly, I think that when folks run for office, they should spend a day on the farm before they take office. It's hard American work. Come muck stalls, right? Yeah, come muck stalls, feed animals, get your hands dirty. I mean, if you want to represent we the people, come and work with we the people, right? Some of them took me up on it. And let's just say, nobody says I'm not a real farmer anymore. Keep going. There's a documentary film that was made. It's shown in universities across the country to help young people, to teach them that they can fight back against overregulation and burdensome red tape, to give them a voice, to let them know that young people, we can teach our young people to speak truth to power and to not be afraid. It's my story of living my childhood dream of being a farmer and fighting back against the bad guys and winning. And it's online, you can see it, just look up Farming in Fear. It won 2 awards, the People's Choice Award at the Anthem Film Festival, and we're hoping that young people in universities all across the country, don't buy in to the fake news media and the radicalized views that so many of our young people are being fed in our universities across the country. Next one. Will I ever be able to farm without fear on the land I love? Yes. Because we fought back. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid anymore. Keep going. We lose when we don't fight, engage, rein in the government, hold them accountable at the polls every day. Go back. Demand sanctions for elected that abuse their authority, which is not, I've never seen it happen. I've never seen an elected official really held accountable for abusing their authority. Start statewide and national petitions, hold lobby days and statewide rallies, find congressional and state heroes, and lift them up. Make them your heroes to get rid of the bad laws and to create sound public policy. And challenge. It's so often people feel like they can't do anything, like we can't make a difference, but we can. I speak all over the country. I'm thankful to God. Without my faith, my family, and my friends, I wouldn't be standing up here before you. Every opportunity I have, I want our elected to know, whether they're in the Trump-Pence administration or wherever they are in our great country, I want people to know how important our property rights are. It's fundamental to being an American. Keep going. Elections can be won or lost by 2 or 3 votes. By the way, this is a picture at the General Assembly. We had over 4,000 Virginians signing petitions. We had our elected officials were receiving countless phone calls. Keep going. Lift up great American patriots. This is, does everybody know who this is? It's Ben Carson, Candy Carson. We have great leaders in our country, and we need to let them know that we, the people, are going to be behind them. Keep going. That's if you want to keep in touch with me. That's my email address and my phone number, and you can follow me on social media. I was just on the border talking to ranchers there. I speak all over the country, and I am here to fight with you. If you've got an issue in your community and you need help, you want national attention on it, you want to make sure that your issue is being heard loud and clear, email me, call me. I will be there, and I'll bring an army of freedom fighters with me. Thank you for the privilege of being here.